This is our last speaker event for this year. I'm currently working on our lineup for next year, and that will kick off in March. In the meantime, on Saturday, November 4th at 2 o'clock, we will be hosting the North Louisiana Historical Association meeting. So if you're interested in joining, be sure to attend that. In December, the museum will be participating in the Christmas in Minden events. So we'll be helping with hayride and hosting kids crafts on Saturday. We're also inviting local organizations to hold one of their regular meetings here at the museum. So if you're a member of an organization that would be interested in doing that, just contact me and we'll get that set up. Also, so this year we had a new book, Historically Speaking, Part 1. I'm working on finishing up Part 2, and hopefully that will be available in time for Christmas. So, and other than that, I'll turn it over to Mark and Jake.
I brought a mic and a whole bunch of other stuff. I don't really know if we're going to need it in this room, so I'm just going to forego it. But thanks for having us tonight. This is something Jake and I haven't really had a chance to do yet, is kind of tell our story of what we've been working on in this. Jake will get more into it in a minute, but to give you kind of a background with me and Jake real quick, I've been with the radio station since 1999. Matter of fact, one of my first jobs was on Wednesday night. I would run the board for a local high school coaches show at the Golden Corral on Wednesday night. It was surf and turf night, if I recall. And they would have the coaches over, and I would run the board for that, followed up by the Jerry DiNardo show. And as far as I know, I'm one of the few people that was only one of the few that ran the board for the Hal Hunter show, if you remember him. He was also known as the guy that coached that one game after DiNardo was fired. So he was the coach before Saban became coach. But anyway, that was my start. And then I started calling a few games in 2000 with Jesse Lowe, who's been at the station since the tower was erected in 1952. He's not here to defend himself, so I can say that. Actually, Jesse's been there, he's closing in on 45 years of being there himself. He's kind of an institution of his own. But anyway, I started calling games by myself in 2001, and up until 2001, we just had Cazo, and then in the summer of 01 is when KBEF went on the air, and I'm proud to say I got to help literally build that station from the ground up. It was just a sheet of paper when I started with the radio station, and it went on the air in the summer of 2001. Well, that first year we weren't quite ready to split programming where we could do individual things. So the first year we still did what we did call the game of the week. So we were doing a combination of Lakeside, Glenbrook, and Minden High games. So we were trying to get a little bit of everybody. But starting in 2002, we were able to do 2 distinct broadcasts. And then I picked up, because Jesse was still working dispatch, I think at the time, with the sheriff's department. He wasn't able to do road games. So I was in college and had the ability to be off, so I drew the short straw and said, "You're going home and away with Minden." I said, "Okay, I'll do it." And you know, I'm a Minden High grad, so I'll gladly do it. So since 2002, I've called every Minden High football game without a miss. So that's up to 242 games, I think, somewhere around in there. So I haven't missed one yet. But, that's
your one-loss record.
Not very good. I called a winless season in 03, so that kind of hurt me a little bit, hurts the old average. But a lot of memorable games. We could probably do another whole night at the museum just on memorable games. But tonight, what we wanted to talk about, and before I forget, Jake came in the 2010 season. I've had several people that have filled in beside me, and that's another story for another day, is the stories from the broadcast that you don't hear, which is probably just as good as the game, or probably better. But Jake started calling games with me in 2010, and he's been my tag team partner since then, and we've had a good run. And I'll give you kind of a quick summary of how this got started. Probably our 3rd or 4th season, we would always run into a situation where a kid would have a really good night, and we're like, well, I wonder where this is historically. Is this like a top 5 moment, or this has got to be one of the best rushing performances ever, or he's got to have more tackles than anybody? We didn't know. Talked to the coaches, no records. So I told Jake, I said, I guess we're just going to have to, it'd be kind of neat to kind of build us a record book of how to get, to kind of add to our broadcast. And that's kind of how we got started. And, I wish I could take a little more credit than I get credit for on this. My name's on it, but I can guarantee you Jake Chapman's done the lion's share of the work on this. So, I will gladly defer to him as far as the lion's share of what you're going to hear tonight, because a lot of it's come from the research he's put in. I've helped him gather the information, but as far as sitting down, and if you saw our Excel worksheets, you've never seen that many numbers in your life, because there's numbers upon numbers. He'll text me every so often and go, what's the cutoff here? What's the cutoff here? So we've got a lot of information we've gathered, and as Jake will tell you tonight, as of just a couple of weeks ago, we were still reconciling information and even plugging in numbers that we didn't have. And that's kind of what we're going to talk about tonight, is just the process of how we assembled what we've assembled. And it's kind of what we call a labor of love for us. We love Minden High football. We love Minden High School. We're both graduates. I graduated in '96, Jake in '02. And he played football. I played baseball. I was too little to play football. I'd have gotten killed. No chance for me. But I love football, and I've watched a lot of Minden High football games, of course, especially after the last 20 years. But I'm going to turn it over to Jake and let Jake kind of take it on from there. So it's all yours, Chreene. Yeah, I'll quick slides for you.
So I'm thrilled to be here to share, as Mark said, kind of a labor of love. If we'll go ahead and get going. So as Mark said, this all started because we wanted to have a little bit of flavor to our broadcast instead of just calling it like we see it on each play. As any good analyst on TV, they always have all these stats and all these historical facts, and so we started to compile all this together. And so Mark uses this stat program called Stat Crew, where he logs all the stats. His dad has been faithful at the post and logging the stats for us in each game. Offensive stats. We're not a full-fledged stat crew where we can track defensive stats, but so what we did is you're able to pull these reports from the length of time that we've started using it, and Mark started using it in 2008, and so historically we're able to kind of gather that data just using that stat program. And so we're kind of limited to have more modern day, lists, just so we can go back and say, well, so-and-so, hasn't had 4 touchdowns since 2009 when so-and-so had it or whatever, just so we can have a little something to reference. So our first edition of the record book, once it was all put together, we had John Agan write a forward to it, because this really all began with him. And John Agan's research was basically just researching the win-loss record. Back then, he had compiled a short list of players that had made All-State. And so when we started doing this, we were kind of pumping him for information. He says, I really just haven't had the time to do this. And so this is what he wrote. He said, despite this storied history, something was missing. Sadly, the availability of records for the MHS football team was sadly lacking. The only way to determine the great achievements of past Minden teams was to spend hours poring over yearbooks and old newspapers and attempting to piece together the story of the Crimson Tide football. And of course, Mark says it was at the tail end of the 2013 season. I think the Webster Parish Library has old newspapers you can go look up. I think they have some information there. And of course, the rest is history, pardon the pun. All right. So this is our why. 1999, Michael Carr rushes for 270 yards, 33 carries, 270 yards. Look what it says right here. Coaches aren't sure. A guy rushes for 270 yards and you have no idea. I mean, obviously it's a good game, but you don't have an idea of where he falls, historically. And I love Coach Watley. I played for Coach Watley. Said he could remember only 4 running backs that reached the 200 yard per game plateau in the last 2.5 decades, which he was actually right. The veteran coach could only come up with 2 backs that topped the 250 boundary. That's right. but he couldn't think of who. A couple of other great backs here were over 200 yards. Said, Watley, I feel certain that you would have to go back to Sammy Seamster around 1986 or 87, which is true, and find a game that gained 250 yards, and I know Raymond Tate did it. That's also true. So this is our why. I played in this game, by the way. But this is our why, because we wanted to know. All right, so a bit of the process. After Mark told me about the newspapers, I was freshly laid off from a job that I dearly loved, and so I spent hours and hours at the library pulling out those huge copies of newspapers, flipping over, and just brute force scanning for articles. So I would log those stats directly onto an Excel spreadsheet. If it got mentioned in an article, I logged it. And this is kind of an example of what we're dealing with there. Going to the next one. So in the early goings of this, I had about 50 stat categories that I would do. I had this spreadsheet that I would make up for each game that had like rushing stats, passing stats, opponent stats, team stats, opposing team stats, and kind of some individual stuff. And so as I would read an article, I would automatically just log it in there. So in 2015, I lost every bit of my research.
We still don't know where that thumb drive is.
I have no idea where that thumb drive is to this day. So that's why you have the crying Jordan picture there. Keep in mind, that started in 2013. So almost 2 years worth of research was gone. So it started over. And I spent hours and hours at the library again. And this time, I took pictures of the articles to get, so I could keep them for documentation. And this is just another example of taking a picture of those articles. That's from 1940. So I started over compiling all the lists. And these are just some of the examples of newspapers that I would reference. You see one where, Minden crushes the Jacks, the Spring Hill Lumberjacks 27-12 in 1953. And of course, Arthur Shine there featured in 1986. So that's kind of what I did was I'd take the picture of it and I'd go back through it again and log it all again. Then I found out that Webster Parish has a database online that has even more copies of newspapers that are not bound. They're a scanned copy. So that's kind of what you're looking at when you're looking at a scanned copy from the Webster Parish database right there. So this is, Paul, go back just a hair. One more. So keep going, forward two more, right there. Okay, it doesn't matter.
We'll stop right there.
That's okay, yeah. So obviously I started with the Minden newspapers, and then I eventually expanded my search to the Shreveport Times, which helped fill a ton of gaps because, sorry, the Webster Parish newspaper scene wasn't very good about reporting statistics. And we'll see later, some of that has to do with writing stylistically in journalism back then. It wasn't about the stats, it was more about the story. And then somehow I'd completely overlooked the Shreveport Journal. I thought, oh, it's just going to have the same stuff. I found even more box scores and team stats and stuff that I'd completely missed. And so I spent the better part of 2 off seasons going all the way back through all of those days and weeks of newspapers looking for any further information I could get. So the Shreveport Journal plugged in even more holes that the Shreveport Times left out, and the rest of these are just some more examples of other newspapers that I was able to find. And there's probably over a dozen more. In the articles that I have right now are about, I texted the other day, it was 3,806 articles. That includes like kind of 2-parters that you have to kind of, you have like one column, and then it says continue to page 8 for the rest of the story. So that includes kind of 2-part articles, but 3,806 total. So there are some problems compiling all of this that made it difficult. Some of the papers were illegible, and that's a scanned copy from 1921. That's kind of hard to scan, and so that left a lot of gaps in the research. A lot of times in the articles there would be no stats. So here's an excerpt from 1938, which was the first state championship that Minden High School had. So Minden Crimson Tide defeated Spring Hill 30-0 last Friday, and now they're ready for Texarkana, Arkansas High School Razorbacks. This game will be played in Minden Friday night. That's all you get, okay? So I was satisfied to at least get a win or a loss and a score, and the opponent, and who they were going to play next. Of course, the date is important, so that way I can look forward to the next week's recap against Texarkana. So that kind of helped aid the research process. Sometimes they would have scoring plays only. They would have summarizing sentences like the Tide scored 3 times in the second half. Okay, not much to go on. So how many yards were those scoring plays? Who scored? How did they score? Did they run? Did they pass? Did they return a kick? So this really leads to incomplete stats, And as authoritative as I would like this to be, there's still way too many holes. Because they're not going to report if so-and-so had 3 carries for 7 yards. They're just not going to. So I don't have like every jot and tittle as much as I would like to have. And the coaching staffs did not keep their stat logs from the year. I can see them in the summer. Oh, guys, we need to clean out the coach's office. Here's a stat sheet of 1978. We don't need that anymore. So I kind of made that up in my mind. I can see them doing that. So this leads to incomplete stats for the game, season totals, and also defensive stats. Defensive stats are probably the hardest thing to track. And at first, when I first started doing this, I didn't even track defensive stats because there were so few and far between. We started receiving the defensive stats from the coaches consistently in 2016. So we kind of started like in earnest there. And as I find stuff, I add it. So there's a lot of holes in it. So as I said, I would kind of use the dates of the newspaper articles to kind of narrow down. The season typically started usually around September. In the early days, it wouldn't start until October. But I would have to go day by day, week by week, until I found some nugget to go off of. Sometimes they would have opponents' schedules on there. So this is the Homer schedule in 1930. And I saw the date, October 17th, so that would kind of give me a date in the future to look forward to. I would have to build it off of that. Sometimes I'd find preview articles, kind of outlining, okay, this is who the Crimson Tide's playing next. And you see, this is 1930, the Greenbacks. Of course, that was their original mascot. It says all members of the team came out of the game Friday, in which the Greenies handed the Arcadia Hornets a 6-0 drubbing. I don't know if I'd count a 6-0 drubbing.
Flowery Lane baseball.
Yeah. But this gave me a date. This lets me know that they played Arcadia last week, and so I would go try to hunt down some sort of summary article for that. Of course, then you have game recap articles anywhere from Friday to Tuesday afternoon.
Notice the average weight of the team, 100 pounds.
Oh yeah, If you were over 200 pounds, you got special mention in the newspaper because they would say so and so is a monster. Big Ken McMichael, if y'all remember that name, Ken McMichael is 215 pounds, the monster. I'm like,
Oh, no.
215. He couldn't survive on the offensive line today. So again, some of the recap articles had very limited information. The style of the writing was more story-driven and poetic, and so there were no stats. So this is from 1938. This is the extent of the article. Minden scored a third victory in as many games when they downed the invading Winfield 11 Friday night by a score of 54-0. Yeah. The Crimson Tide held the upper hand over the visitors from the first. The boys, by beating their first Class A opponent with such a wide margin, seem well on the way to a brilliant season, which, if their present pace keeps up, will inevitably be climaxed by their winning the state championship. Although victorious by a larger margin, the Tide did not show quite as much form as they did in beating the Texarkana Porkers the week before. Accordingly, the next week will be spent in strenuous practice on blocking, tackling, and offensive drills. All right, so again, it tells us that they won. It tells us what the score, but no stats. And it continues, the Crimson Tide, which Jerry Bozeman thinks should be called the Magicians, again baffled their opponents with their disappearing ball tricks. From the start of the game, the close Winfield scarcely saw the pigskin. In the opening moments of the first quarter, Minden would make beautiful gains from 10 to 25 yards, only to lose the ball on frequent fumbles. Again, I'm going to pause here. Yeah, it mentions yardage there, but I don't know. The frequent fumbles, is that 2? Is that 12? I don't know. There's nothing to get out of that, but it wasn't long before the machinery began to click and the end of the quarters, Minden had chalked up 14 points. Okay. The second quarter, the team added 13 points to the previous score, and the half ended with Minden 27 and Winfield nothing. The Minden band drew a big hand from the crowd in their exhibition during the period between the halves. Miss Imogene Willis, high-stepping drum major. See, so we're mentioning the band and all that in the article here. Led the band, which performed with all the skill and seasoned military unit through intricate maneuvers. Upon resuming play, the Tide continued its forward march and scored an additional touchdown. I don't know who or how. The team gained an extra point. Okay, but it doesn't say who kicked it. At the end of the third period, the score was 34-0. In the fourth quarter, the boys gained more momentum and scored 3 touchdowns and 2 extra points, bringing the total score 54-0. Next Friday, Crimson Tide travels to Mansfield to play its second Class A game. This battle promises to be one of the toughest for the local boys, and quite a large following is expected to accompany the players. So this is, kind of par for the course until you get to about the mid-50s. It describes what happened in the game. It kind of gives you an idea that Minden held the upper hand the entire time, had some mistakes in there. So that's kind of what we had to deal with. Go back just to here. Yeah, so sometimes there wouldn't be a recap article letting you know what happened in the game, but sometimes I would gain the information that's actually tucked in a completely different article that had nothing to do with it. So this is from the New Orleans Times in 1912, and this is talking about Homer. Friday was a school children's day at the fair, yada, yada, yada. Flash forward all the way to the bottom. One of the attractions of the day of the fair, aside from the races, was a football game between the Homer and Minden High School teams. Notice there's no mascots or anything mentioned there. The visitors had an easy victory, winning by a score of 26-0. So who won that game?
Who was visitors?
Who were the visitors?
Because it was in Homer.
Bingo! I had to learn that because I saw this and I thought, well, dadgum, who won this game? I don't know, So I learned that if they're special to whatever newspaper, they usually started off where they were reporting from. So that let me know that Minden was the visitors, and so in this case, we awarded the win to Minden High School. So, is it Charlie Cavell?
Yeah.
Charlie Cavell puts together stats and records and stuff for Byrd High School. And so he sent us a PDF copy of their record book, and so I went through and tried to find Minden stuff again to try to extrapolate any information I could. And so I found that we played Byrd twice in 2011. So that's kind of some other sources that I'll get information from. Sometimes, again, it wouldn't have a recap article, but I would find it in a preview article, just as we saw before. This is 1911, so we see that we're in the same year that we have this information here. but I'm just trying to find some sort of recap article, some sort of information other than a score and a result. So the Shreveport High School football team, Bird, will meet the team from the Minden High School Thanksgiving afternoon. Okay, so Minden used to play Shreveport on Thanksgiving. Of course, a lot of you probably grew up playing Spring Hill. Yeah, playing Spring Hill on Thanksgiving Day. They played it at Centenary Park, and a splendid game is expected. Okay, the game will be called at 3 o'clock. Professor C.H. Young, chairman of the faculty committee on athletics, and he takes a great deal of interest in the game, says the boys are in splendid trim, and that those who go out will see a good exhibition of the sport. The Shreveport boys played Minden in Minden some 2 weeks ago. Okay, so it's giving me an idea of when they played based on the date that this article was written. And were victorious by a score of 6-0. But it is understood that the team that Minden will bring this time is stronger. So again, using this date of this article, it would kind of give me an idea of when to look for that 7-0 victory. So there are some gems, wouldn't call them holy grails, but whenever we came across this stuff, you're like, yes, this is what we have. So Shreveport Times especially would have team stats at the end of the recap articles. So again, starting in the early 50s, mid-50s, you started seeing more reporting like this, where they would have just kind of a tail of the tape at the end of the game. And then again, in 1980, something else we started seeing is an actual scoring summary, so you could see who scored, how they scored, and from how far out they scored, or the distance that they scored. And again, you kind of see a line for line description. Oh, go back. This is kind of cool. They give you, they actually would give you who scored the touchdowns back then, but they would just say, Cox scored 3 and Allman points after the touchdown, Honeycutt 2, Minden touchdowns, Charlie Hennigan 2, point after touchdown, Adcock. And that's all you'd get. And again, you'd have a recap article of the game, but just not a whole lot of yardage and stuff. So there's some gems, and then there's some problems. So whenever you have multiple sources trying to confirm stuff, sometimes you get different numbers, and this impacts the tracking and determining what the record number is. And let's pause here for a second. In 1986, the Press Herald, we go to this second thing here. They reached down deep to defeat a stubborn Northwood team 40-27. Junior tailback Sammy Seamster dazzled fans once again as he picked up 279 yards on 19 carries and scored 5 touchdowns. Seamster finished the regular season with 2,603 yards and 26 rushing touchdowns. This tells me a few things. That's a big number, and I haven't seen that yet. Okay? This also tells me how many yards he finished up in the regular season and how many touchdowns. So this is a gem. Like, yes, I have real numbers to go off of. So as you try to confirm some of these stories and you look for multiple sources on these games, you start getting conflicted numbers. Again, these are gems because they have individual stats. We'll pause here for a second. Again, same time, same game, Minden against Northwood. This time we have individual stats at the end of the game, at the end of the article. Along with your team stats, you have a scoring summary. This is a gem. I mean, this is great. The Shreveport Times and the Shreveport Journal were chock full of this stuff for many years, and I'm so thankful that I came across that. So let's look here. Sammy Seamster, you may not be able to see that. According to the Shreveport Times, Sammy Seamster had 21 carries, not 19, and 284 yards. So the Press Herald had 279. Sammy Seamster in the Times had 284. Which is it? So as we continue, again, within a day, it's the same date, reported by a different publication. You know, it's virtually the same box score, but again, I have a second source that shows that Sammy Seamster had 21 carries and 284 rushing yards. So I decided to go to the net. Yeah. So I have two sources that confirm 284. So I gave him credit for 284 yards for the rushing record, and that's the single game rushing record to this day. And again, this is a gem to find a full box score at the end of an article that has individual stats. Just not to keep, I guess, belaboring that point with you, you get it. Sometimes in the Shreveport Times they would list the stat leaders through the weeks of rush, pass, receiving, and scoring. So just to highlight this portion right here for you. So we see there that through, I think this is, what is it?
That's at the end of the year.
Yeah, it's towards the end of the year. TQ Mims from Minden was 82 of 143, passing for 1,810 yards and 24 touchdowns and 4 interceptions. And of course, 2006, they continued on to the state semifinals. So, but again, this is another gem because it tells me what his stats were at the end of that year. Again, no defensive stats. So it's all about the offense. Sometimes we would come across a play-by-play account of the game. And so this is this entire portion of this article, and it goes play by play. And so I would open up a trusty rusty Excel spreadsheet, and I would chart this game because the game recap would have very little stats. And so I took this and extrapolated more stats, and now I won't bore you by reading through this entire thing, but this is an account from the 1956 state championship game against Opelousas from the Opelousas Daily World. And so that helped us get more stats out of that.
Who won?
Minden High School. All right, so this is kind of fun. I came across this, 2 weeks ago?
Yeah.
Sometimes the recap article had nothing to do with the game. This is from the Ville Platte Gazette. This is, again, from an account from the 1938 state championship game, again, from against Opelousas. A large delegation of Ville Platte and other Evangeline football fans braved bitter weather Friday night to make the journey to Opelousas to see the powerful Opelousians make hash of the invading Minden 11. Again, it's more poetic, it's more story-driven. As it turned out, however, the St. Landry Club wasn't doing very well that night. In fact, Minden stopped them good and proper to the tune of 34-6. The passing of Vautier to Lalonde was outstanding, but failed to bring Opelousas more than one touchdown. Perhaps the bitterest blow to Opelousas team backers was the cleanup made by the gamblers backing Minden. Opelousas supporters they lost. Estimates placed the money lost by Opelousas supporters at something like $5,000.
That's over $100,000 if you move it forward today.
Toward game time, Mendonites were spotted as high as 16 points, and money went begging. Opelousas lost the state championship, but won the South Louisiana crown by nosing out Benton in a meet and lucky playoff game. So again, this is just fun stuff, fun stories to find along when you're doing research. So back to the beginning.
Jake, they played that game Christmas Eve.
Yes, sir. Well, that article was from Christmas Eve.
Yeah.
But they would probably play before then. I'm not sure the date, but that article was from Christmas Eve. Yes, sir. Minden High School opened in 1901 and shortly thereafter began fielding a football team. Again, this is a quote from John Again from the first edition of the record book. As early as 1907, alumni of Minden High were playing college football, although it is not certain when the school began sponsoring an official team. We do know that by 1916, Minden High School was playing football and playing it well. So hold off on the next. You can go. Yeah. So here we are, Homer again. This is The football game at Minden last Saturday between the team of that city and the Homer team. I thought that would get a bigger laugh than the team of that city. And the Homer team resulted in an overwhelming victory for the latter. Who won the game? Homer. The score is 47-5. Another game is scheduled between the same teams for Thanksgiving Day. So does anybody want to guess what year this article was written? Just call it out. I would say there are no wrong answers, but that'd be wrong.
1918.
1918, that's pretty good. Any other takers? No?
Ready?
Yeah. 1909.
Chris,
We
So-
found out 2 years ago.
Yeah, I actually saw that. I think you'd sent it to me. That the Claiborne Parish Library posted something about Homer football, and they had a snippet of this article on there, and I thought, holy cow, 1909. Okay, so again, in the off season, that led me down another rabbit hole looking for more information. So this is the other account of that other team, Minden. And this is cool because you actually have a starting lineup, so that's also some great information there. So this article is from December 1st of 1909 of them playing on Thanksgiving. This time, they tell you who the referees were. Referee Denham, umpire, H. Kirkpatrick, okay. Time of halves, 15 and 20 minutes. So did you play 15 minutes the first half and 20 minutes the second half? I don't know.
that Brown, the quarterback, was that Gary Brown, do you think?
I think so. But just to kind of,
I was too old.
seeing some of these names, and that's something that I have on my radar, is to do, it'd be impossible to do really, to get a full authoritative team roster, but just go through and just have an all-time roster list. All right, let's keep moving. Is everybody okay? Is this too long? Okay. So this is just some more stuff that I found after going down that rabbit hole. This is an article from the New Orleans Times Democrat from 1910. Again, playing Centenary College in 1910. Got beat 35-6. Yeah, because you're playing college kids. Minden's lack of experience and weight proved to be the chief handicap, but the boys in the second half of the game showed pluck and endurance. All right. A feature was a brilliant run by Richard Drew, which gave Minden a touchdown. So this is the first mention of an individual statistic as I can find. I don't know how long it was, but we know that at least Richard Drew had a rushing touchdown in that game. All right, so some of you are familiar with the mascot. Around 1909 and earlier, they were just the Minden High School football team. In 1920, you see Coach Dan Stewart, who was a manager of Tulane's last year. So what color is Tulane? Green and white. All right, so in 1923, they would mention to carry the green and white colors. Again, no mascot. It's usually Minden High School, and then they start talking about the green and white. And later on in 1923, the green and white machine, okay, as they played Marshall, Texas. Later on, again in 1923, you see the first that I could find mention of greenbacks, just a team mascot. And around the same time is whenever you see Shreveport High referred to as the Yellow Jackets. Up until this time, it's just so-and-so high school against so-and-so high school, or they would mention the colors. And they remained the greenbacks or greenies for short until 1934. So the 1934 season is kind of weird. They began the season being called the Greenies. In October 2nd, 1934, in the Minden Signal Tribune, they're called the Crimson Avalanche, like out of nowhere. All right. The next day in the Shreveport Times, they're actually referred to as the Crimson Tide. And then just the following week, the Signal Tribune is still calling them the Crimson Avalanche. And then the following week, the Minden Signal Tribune finally gets on the same page as everybody else and starts calling them the Crimson Tide. And again, that's not something I haven't done a whole lot of research in, but just from what I've heard, maybe a Minden High School principal back then, went to an Alabama football game and was just so impressed with the Crimson Tide. And to my knowledge, we may be the only high school mascot that's the Crimson Tide. I know for a fact in Louisiana. So-
Wasn't it the Green Wave at some point in time? I've heard that term.
There were the greenbacks.
Greenback.
There's a grasshopper. Actually, I think they have a green, an old letter jacket that's green back here.
One Spring Hill, the Greenbacks also.
I don't know.
Earlier, didn't you say that was their name early?
All Minden, I think.
No, sir.
Oh, I thought you were talking about Spring Hill before they were.
Oh, the Jacks. They call them the Jacks.
Oh,
But
I thought they were the Greenbacks.
no, they were the greenbacks, or they would call them the greenies for short. And up until then, they were just the green and white machine, or the green and white colors.
Which kind of flows with what they call the yearbook degree.
That's right. Just some more information about the history of Minden High School football. Minden has won 5 state championships in 38. This is the fall of 38, 54, 56, 63. 63 is the only team to have an undefeated season. And in 1980.
You know, the coach from Northwestern came into the locker room and offered a scholarship to the entire team.
The 63
That
team?
game.
Yeah.
Wow.
Never heard that
Yeah,
story.
yeah,
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that.
The entire team?
The entire team.
the entire team.
Wow. In 1921, they played.
I knew they had one.
In 1921, they had a 9-1 record. They lost the state championship game at Warren Easton. They traveled down to New Orleans and lost 7-0. Up until that time, they had outscored their opponents 284-7.
Oh my goodness.
That 1-7 came against Warren Easton. So up until then, it was 284-0, and they lost that last game. So as of 2020, there were 300 plus football playing schools in the LHSAA, and only 21 other schools have won more than 5 state championships. So even though it's been a very long time, we're still considered a successful program. Just to kind of give you an idea of what we're dealing with, John Curtis has won 38, and Haynesville has won 17. And Minden's also won 15 district championships. Kind of changing gears a little bit as we start to wrap it up here. Minden's had several players named to All-State team. Of course, we talked about James Britt earlier. He was first team All-State and Defensive Player of the Year. I had not known that until I started looking that up. And our current coach, Spencer Hurd, was the 4A Coach of the Year in 2014. So when we first started working with this, and John Agan kind of passed the baton to us, he gave us a list of 48 names, but they included only first team All-State. So again, in one of the off seasons, I caught the bug, went down the rabbit hole again, found more first team names, added the second and third teams, and also honorable mentions. Again, the entire way I'm clipping the article and saving like a PDF format, so I have proof if anybody calls into question any of this stuff. So since then, that list has expanded to 187 All-State selections, with 39 on the first team, 28 second team, 10 on the third team, and 110 honorable mention. The earliest All-State selection I could find was in 1916, and it was determined by Harry Martinez of the New Orleans Times-Picayune, obviously New Orleans. And so he would determine these All-State players. Back then, in 1916, you might have 10, 12 football playing schools in the entire state. So it was a little easier to make All-State back then. But in 1916, we see John Dutton, not associated with the Yellowstone crew. Any fans of the show? No? Okay. Kurt,
Doesn't play at LSU though.
did he? All right. See, man, this is good. I'm learning stuff. Kirkley, this is also kind of a problem. Is I don't know who the first names are, and sometimes that's all you get is just a last name. Life was a second teamer, and Smith was a second teamer in 1916.
What was it was Will?
Will I?
Will Life, you think?
I bet it was.
I bet it
Maybe
was.
it's filled out at
Yeah, on the hardware.
Old baseball field has got his name attached to it, doesn't it, now, like the old Babs Park?
Really?
They call it Real Life Field now?
Yeah.
How about that?
That would make sense.
Okay. Well, I'll have to file that away when I start.
Another rabbit
trying-
hole for us.
Yeah. That's gonna be probably a never-ending project, trying to find out the names of all these guys, but. Anyway, we kind of joked around with Mr. Gary about his picture being in black and white and how they were rendering. That was the picture of John Dutton in 1916. So, anyway, but the teams with the most selections in 1954, they were state champions. They had 11 players make All-State. In 1938, they had 10. And you see, this is the first team, second team, and third team, and I didn't include the honorable mentions on that. 1956, they had 8 All-State selections. Here's some kind of oddities. 1923, they didn't have just a great year. They were 5-3. Didn't go to the playoffs or anything like that, but they had 9 All-State selections. So I thought that was kind of neat. And the 63 state championship team was undefeated state champions, and they had 4 All-Staters. Again, by that time, you probably had 100 football playing schools across all classifications. So here's a list of the 2-time winners, players that have won All-State twice. I'll kind of give you a minute to
And Tom Alley. That's
look through there.
Veterinarian.
Dr. Allen.
Funny story about Tom Alley. Mark and Sarah used to go visit the Alleys regularly.
I'm still light on that onion because of it.
And he looked through our first record book, and his name was not listed as one of All-State. And he says, "Mark, I made All-State." And I'm like, "No, you did." So if Dr. Tom Alley was still alive, I'd have to come to him hat in hand that I found proof that he did make All-State. You know, so this is a list of the 2-time winners.
H.L. Bridges.
Yeah. You want me to read them?
No, I didn't.
Just have it when you're ready.
H.L. Bridges was a really good athlete, had 2 brothers that lived over in our neighborhood. They were good folks.
Nice.
That Harkness one caught me, the last name.
Yeah.
Billy Townsend, that's who they call
Is that Billy
Coon
Jack?
Dog.
Coon Dog,
Yeah,
all right.
And he's still alive and doing
Is
well.
that Billy Jack?
Yeah,
Yeah.
He was the weightlifting coach
Yeah.
over at Tech,
Right.
right? I remember him.
Billy Joe played at LSU and then in the Canadian Football League.
Really? I know a lot of these guys played at Louisiana Tech. That's O.H. Haynes Jr. Okay, not Freddie Haynes.
No, he was the second sheriff.
Yeah.
His daddy was the sheriff. Then Jack Batten, I believe was his name, beat him, and then Little O.H. they called him. And then O.H. the third.
O.H. the third.
It was Freddie's brother, so there was
Yeah.
a bunch of good Haynes.
and you know, he was married in high school, but they were secretly married.
Really?
Yeah, he and Miss Freddie and.
Really?
Yeah, and didn't announce it until after they had graduated from high school because he wouldn't have been able to play football.
Oh,
Wow.
That's pretty cool.
Freddie Haynes.
He's not on the 2-time winners list, but talk about Freddie Haynes. Freddie Haynes played quarterback, and they call him Little Freddie Haynes. And he was so good at quarterback when it came time to make the All-State selection. The Martinez fella picked somebody from like Fontainebleau or something to be the first team quarterback, but felt so strongly about Freddie Haynes' effort that year that Freddie Haynes made All-State as a running back and not quarterback. So they said, well, we're going to kick out one of the running backs and give it to Freddie Haynes because he deserves to be first-time All-State. Yeah.
Redwood and Abnett, that's,
Yeah, Magnus house.
Yeah. And of course, the last 2-time selection is Zacharian Baker in 2015 and 2016. I believe he's still currently playing for Ole Miss right now. So doesn't get a lot of playing time, but he still was good enough to get signed at a Division I SEC school. We'll kind of slow down a minute here. There have been a handful of 3-time winners. Of course, back then, you were not allowed to play football as a freshman. So if you made All-State for your sophomore, junior, and senior year, that was really something special. Came across this guy, Bertley. I'd never heard this guy's name before. Never. And he's top 5 rushing touchdown leader in Minden High School history. Never heard of him. But he made All-State for 3 years. George Red Turner, from 37 through 39 again. Next one.
Oh, okay.
That's all right. Doug Skinner, 53 to 55. He played at Arkansas, I believe.
No, played at LSU.
LSU.
He played at LSU.
Yeah,
Okay.
he went to LSU as a freshman, and they had an All-American guy from Ferry, a center. What was it? Fugler.
Max Fugler. I've heard
He
that name.
beat Max Fugler out.
He told Max Fugler, he's a freshman, he told Max Fugler, find him somewhere else to
That's
play.
exactly. He was the best.
Yeah.
But I don't think he stayed out of jail for it.
Really? Max Fugler or Doug Skinner?
Doug Skinner.
I was told he was kicked off the team because he was too violent.
Really? How about that?
The story I
Didn't
had,
go to class either?
the story I had why he got kicked off, the first road game,
I'm pretty sure.
he didn't show up at the airplane, and they found out he'd gone across the river, which is bad, and didn't get back in time.
Oh, wow.
So, but he was a bad dude.
Yeah. Well, Carlton Prothro told us a funny story about Doug Skinner, because Barry Switzer, who was coaching at Arkansas, that's probably where I got that from. He had come to see Doug Skinner play and was there to recruit him. And
No, I was in '63. He was looking at, what was the guy, defensive tackle?
Again, Jerry Woods.
no,
He was looking at a defensive player from Minden.
he was looking at defensive. Maybe okay, I'm sorry. I thought it was Doug Skinner, but he was
Still a
looking
good
at
story.
he was looking at a defensive player from Minden, and one of the opposing running backs was
From,
Jet something or other.
yeah, it was from,
And
Ritter.
DeRitter. And
Trigger.
Trigger Allen, that's it. And he,
First play of the game.
first play of the game, our defensive guy, I cannot think of it to save my life.
Dennis Gomez was
It was, you said Dennis. Dennis McClure. Dennis
Dennis
McClure. See? That,
McClure, yeah.
That's right.
that was right. As soon as he said Dennis,
Take a
he
look at McClure.
came to look at Dennis McClure. McClure tackled Trigger Allen in the backfield on the first play of the game, but Switzer said, man, how far is it from here to DeRitter? Because he had saw how fast Trigger Allen had gotten to the outside edge and was just so impressed with his speed that he was there to see he was there to see him, but he wanted to know how far it was from here to DeRitter's because he wanted to go see Trigger Allen some more. But Raymond Tate, everybody, I grew up hearing about Raymond Tate. He made it from 79 to 81 and was a parade All-American in 81. And then, of course, Sammy Seamster was the Offensive Player of the Year in 1986 and three-time All-State player.
We should have won state that year.
Yep.
Yeah.
But I was on that team, and the reason we lost to Washington, it was,
Jonathan Pierce.
well, no, it was, that week it rained and it was cold and it was ice. And we practiced in overcoats the whole week. And the day of the game, a whole group of the team went hunting. And they were, I guess, and so after the game, it was found out that a lot of the team members went hunting and we had lost to Washington.
Wow.
After we throttled him earlier.
Yes, yes.
Well, thank you for sharing that. That's good to know. I enjoy stuff like that. But in 2015, we finished the first edition, had about 186 stat categories, and then we released a second edition in 2018 to 205 categories, and that's just the cover art. And so the current work in progress has 246 stat categories. So we have not released one since 2018, and we had originally had planned to release one every 2 to 3 years, but in the off season, man, I'd get down these rabbit holes, and I'd have to go, like, just make sure all the numbers added up and just kind of do some accounting to make sure that they all added up and that no stone was left unturned. So last thing, Mark and I have been talking about doing this for a long time, but just haven't found the time to do it. And this year we're making the time to do it. We started a podcast called the First and Tide Rewind. And we're doing weekly game recaps, and we have some interviews. We've released the first interview. My mind's gone blank. Oh yeah, with L'Jarius Sneed, who's the current cornerback for the Kansas City Chiefs. Mark caught up with him at his camp that he did back in the summer when it was 110 degrees outside. We had tried all summer to try to get he and David Lee together, at least over the phone, to talk about their journeys, because both are Minden High School graduates, both played at Louisiana Tech, and both are Super Bowl winning players, and that's super rare.
I have a list that I compiled of people from Webster Parish that have played in the Super Bowl.
Really?
Yeah, so.
Nice, I'd like to get that from you.
I'll see if I can find it, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Sell it to me.
So, yeah.
Sell it! Oh!
I don't believe in that.
But you can find us on Facebook. Just search First and Tide Rewind, and you can find the interviews and the game recaps on there. The podcast also released, for those of you who don't know, this is the Spotify logo. You can go to the app called Spotify and listen to the podcast there. And of course, you can go to kbef.com, and at the top, there's a button you can click on that says podcasts. You can find the episodes there. You wanted to go ahead and tell them who the next episode is going to be?
We'll probably drop that one this week. It's Roger Anderson's our next one from the 63 team.
Had a really great
We had a
meeting
great interview with him.
with Roger Anderson. He supplied us with names and phone numbers of other members from the 63 state championship team that we're going to follow up with. Our goal is to do game recap once a week and then release a monthly interview. And the whole purpose of this is just to keep the history of Minden High School football alive. So, any questions for Mark or myself? I've kept you a really long time, and I really appreciate the patience. I told you it wasn't going to be an hour, and I made a liar of myself. I trotted this out at the Men in Lions Club and made it more about the statistics, and at about 10 after 1, the guy started getting up and leaving. So, but this one I wanted to make it all about just the history and the data gathering and the articles, and I have hundreds and hundreds of other pictures that I've clipped from the articles and stuff. So, and this is a living document. As I find more stuff, I've started in 2007 and started working my way backwards, doing a keyword search on newspapers.com, and I've been able to find even more stuff. So, anyway, thank y'all so much for having us. And
Thank you.
Thank y'all for coming and talking to us and sharing your process. I know I enjoyed it. I think everyone here enjoyed it.